And good morning, boys and girls, and I'm sorry, mommies and daddies, and grandmommies and grandpuppies. Today's story is quite exciting, I think, anyway. Now, if you remember, one of our stories of maybe a couple months ago was talking about Mr. and Mrs. Farmer Brown adopting Little Bad Wolf. So yesterday was Sunday. Friday, Mr. Farmer Brown went to the school. He substitutes bus drivers if they need a day off. If for some reason he comes in and drives that bus for the person that wanted that day off. So he was there Friday, and he stopped by Miss Eileen's room. And he said, I have news to tell you, Miss Eileen. And she said, oh, okay, Mr. Farmer Brown, what's going on? And he says, well, Monday, Mrs. Farmer Brown and I have an appointment with the lawyer, and we need to take Little Bad Wolf out of school. Oh, my dear. Oh, is something wrong? Did Little Bad Wolf get in some trouble? And he says, now, Miss Eileen, why would you say that? You know that Little Bad Wolf is a straight-A student. Why would you think he got in trouble? I'm so sorry, she said. You know, it's his name, and I that's a stereotype, and I apologize, Mr. Farmer Brown. That's not good. That I should just jump to that conclusion that because his name is Little Bad Wolf, that he got in trouble. She says, I am so sorry. I apologize for that. He says, well, that's okay. He said, what we're going to do, he said, we're going to put in paperwork to adopt him. Oh, she says, Mr. Farmer Brown, won't that be nice? I know all your children are grown. You know, I went to school with your daughter. And he says, yes. He says, I remember that. He says, you used to come over to the farm and play all the time, didn't you? She said, yes, we sure had a good time. So she had some good memories of playing with his daughter, because most of the time, all the boys and girls that came over to play would just play so hard. They would get so dirty and sweaty that before they went home, he got a great big tub, like the big tub that the cows drink out of. Oh, but this was a new one, though. And he built a little fence around it. And he had all the little girls go behind that fence where the tub was, and they jumped in the tub and they had a little bath while Mrs. Farmer Brown washed their clothes. And then when they got out, he called the little boys in, if there was some little boys playing, and he got them in the tub. And they had a little bath, and Mrs. Farmer Brown washed their clothes so that they all went home nice and clean with clean clothes. So that was one of Miss Eileen's favorite memories. Now, boys and girls, that's also based on a true story by a very famous man who owns a restaurant. And you grown-ups can figure that out to your heart's content. That's pretty good. So, he says, yes, he says, Mrs. Farmer Brown and I have been talking quite a while about adopting Little Bad Wolf, and we think it's the best thing for him, and we think it's the best thing for us. But he says, Monday, we have an appointment with the lawyer, and he wants to meet Little Bad Wolf. Wow. Well, she says, we're not doing anything right now that Little Bad Wolf has to be here for. She said, so Monday's a good day for him to not come to school. She said, that'll be wonderful. She says, I will be thinking about you and praying about you and just hoping that everything just goes hunky-dory. And he says, well, I hope so too. And she says, Mr. Farmer Brown, she says, once again, she says, I'm going to apologize for thinking the worst of Little Bad Wolf. She says, because I know he's a good little boy. She says, and I hope you get a good lawyer who doesn't jump to conclusions like I did. But you know, some of my kids in my class, she says, I don't have very many. She says, I only have 2 that I have to be careful of because sometimes they get a little bit ornery. She says, the rest of my class, she says, oh my goodness, she says, you know how good this class is. She says, you drove the bus with them a couple of times. She says, they're fun. They can be loud, but they can be very nice, and they're mostly all A and B students. She says, I have just never seen a class like this. She says, I am just amazed at how good this class is. And he says, I know. He says, and you're a good teacher, Miss Eileen. He said, and the kids like you. So she says, thank you. And with that, Mr. Farmer Brown left her office. Well, now it is Monday. And, yesterday, Sunday, Mrs. Farmer Brown called Little Bad Wolf up on the telephone. And she says, Little Bad Wolf, would you please come over here Monday morning? Well, I got to go, you mean before I go to school? And she says, no. She said, we have talked to your teacher. We have a special something for you to do. And we've talked to Miss Eileen, and she said it was okay for you to miss school. Now, if we get through early enough, then you can go back to school the rest of the day. He says, okay. He says, I'll be there. And she says, now, why don't you wear your Sunday shirt that you had on today and a clean pair of jeans, okay? And he goes, okay. And he's hung up and he says, I sure hope I have a pair of clean jeans. Well, he did, because Mrs. Farmer Brown slipped in that day while he was out playing and left a brand new pair of jeans in his drawer. Oh my goodness gracious, he didn't even remember that he had got these jeans. And she took him shopping before school. And he says, I thought I wore all my jeans. How did this pair get in the drawer? Well, maybe I didn't wear them then. I thought I did. So he gets all dressed up, combs his hair, brushes his teeth, and starts over to Mr. and Mrs. Farmer Brown's house. Well, Mr. Farmer Brown and Mrs. Farmer Brown, they were so excited. She was so excited to start this adoption of him that she couldn't even put her earrings on right. She just couldn't get them in the little holes. She was that excited. And Mr. Farmer Brown says, Mrs. Farmer Brown, sweetheart, now calm down, calm down. Do you want me to put your earrings on for you? Oh, yes, she says, Mr. Farmer Brown, honey, she says, put my earrings on because I just can't do it. I'm just so nervous. I'm so shaky. And they were smiling. Oh, my goodness gracious. And so Little Bad Wolf, he knocked on the door, and Mrs. Farmer Brown says, oh, Mr. Farmer Brown, sweetheart, that's got to be him. That's got to be him. Oh, 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 oh. And Mr. Farmer Brown ran to the door and opened up the door, and there stood Little Bad Wolf. Little Bad Wolf says, what's going on? Why don't I go to school today? What's going on? And Mr. Farmer Brown says, well, sit down here at the table. Would you like a little bit of coffee? Oh, Mr. Farmer Brown, could I have some coffee, please? Now, I know I'm only 6 years old, but I'm almost 7, so I can drink coffee, can't I? And Mr. Farmer Brown says, yes, you can drink coffee because we'll put some milk in and it won't be very strong. GrandMommy's drinking coffee too. So, about that time, when Mr. Farmer Brown was pouring the coffee for Little Bad Wolf and for himself, he poured one for Mrs. Farmer Brown. And about that time, she comes through the door into the kitchen, and she sat down at the kitchen table. And Mr. Farmer Brown puts the coffee cups on the kitchen table, and he sits down at the kitchen table. And both of them looked at Little Bad Wolf with great big smiles on their face. And Little Bad Wolf says, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong that I don't remember? You know what happened today, Mr. Farmer Brown? The funniest thing happened today. Mrs. Farmer Brown asked me to wear my Sunday school shirt and a clean pair of jeans. And I go into the drawer to see if I had a clean pair of jeans, and there's a brand new pair of jeans in my drawer. I don't know how that happened. And Mrs. Farmer Brown smiled, and she said, well, you know, strange things happen, little bad wolf. Well, Mr. Farmer Brown says, okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do today. And we needed you to be with us. Oh, what are we going to do? Are we going to plant some corn? Are we going to build a barn again? What are we going to do? Mrs. Farmer Brown says, now, little bad wolf, if you were going to plant some corn or build a barn, would you be wearing your good clothes? Oh, I guess I wouldn't, would I? Said little bad wolf. Well, Mr. Farmer Brown said, do you remember a long time ago we talked about how would you like to have us adopt you? And you said you thought that would be pretty nice. And you even started to cry, didn't you? And little bad wolf says, oh yeah, that was the happiest day of my life. But he said, you never said anything more about it. He said, so I just figured you had changed your mind. And of course with that, Mrs. Farmer Brown started to cry. And Mr. Farmer Brown says, no, 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 we didn't change our mind. We just had some things we had to do first. And you remember, I built the skating rink, and you know how long that took, and so we talked about that before the skating rink was even built. So, you know, I've been busy, and there's things legally that I had to do, too. And little bad wolf says, legally. Legally. That means it's official. That means things that you had to do. And that means maybe like lawyers and policemen and things like that. And Mr. Farmer Brown laughed and he says, well, yes, he said that would describe legally. He says, so today, the three of us are going to see my lawyer. Oh my goodness gracious. My lawyer's name is Mr. Kildare, and he is a very nice man, and he's going to be our lawyer. Oh, little bad wolf was jumping up and down. He couldn't believe that today he was going to get adopted. And so they jumped in the car and they went to town, and Mrs. Farmer Brown was explaining to little bad wolf that he wasn't going to be adopted today. They were going to start all the paperwork. But in probably 4 weeks, he would be adopted legally. That word again. And oh my gosh, he just couldn't, he wiggled all over the seat. He was so excited. And he says, can I tell the 3 little pigs, please, 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 can I tell them, can I tell them, can I tell them, can I tell them? And she says, let's find out how long it takes. And then just before the date that we're going to sign the papers, a week before that, you can tell all the boys and girls. Oh my gosh. He just didn't know what to do. He was so excited. Well, they got to Mr. Kildare's office, and it said his name across the door. Mr. Chester Kilgore, Esquire. He's an Esquire? Mrs. Farmer Brown, what does Esquire mean? And she says, well, that's for a man who's in business, and that usually means he's a pretty good whatever he does. Maybe I can grow up and be an Esquire. What's my name going to be? And she says, well, so far it's going to be Little Bad Wolf. And then she says it'll be Little Bad Wolf Brown. Oh, my goodness gracious. Whew. He was just so excited. He just was jumping up and down. So they went into the lawyer's office, and they told the secretary that they were there to see Mr. Kilgore. I knew something was wrong. It's Kilgore, not Kildare. That's a doctor. Dr. Kilgore, or I mean, Dr. Kildare and Mr. Esquire Kildore. Ay, ay, ay. Anyway, so Mr. Kilgore called him into the office, and he says, "What can I do for you, Mr. and Mrs. Farmer Brown?" And, "Oh, hello, little bad wolf. I haven't seen you for a long time." Little Bad Wolf had never seen this man before, and he says, "I don't know you. I don't think I know you." And Mr. Kilgore says, "That's okay. I know who you are, and you're a fine young man, I understand." Yes, sir. I get A's and B's in my school." "Oh, you're a smart little boy, too." He said, "Well, I try to be." And so with that, they sit down. After they shook hands, they sit down, and Mr. Kilgore says, "Now, what can I do for you people today?" Now, when Mr. Farmer Brown called him to make an appointment, the secretary had asked him what was his business so that she could tell Mr. Kilgore, so that she could get some records ready for him or some books for him to look at different laws. That was the way she did the office. And so Mr. Farmer Brown says to the lady, he says, "Well, we're going to try to adopt Little Bad Wolf." And she says, "Oh, I've heard of that little boy." She says, "He's a nice little boy, isn't he?" And Mr. Farmer Brown says, "Well, we certainly think he is." So Mr. Kilgore, the lawyer, he already knew what Farmer Brown wanted, but he was trying to be very polite in front of Little Bad Wolf. And so he says, "Now, what brings you to my office today?" Mr. and Mrs. Farmer Brown, he looked at them both, and with a big smile on her face, Mrs. Farmer Brown just popped out and said, "We're gonna adopt Little Bad Wolf. We're so excited." And Little Bad Wolf, he's just jumping in his seat. He's just so squirming around, so excited. And so Mr. Kilgore said, "Well, I just happen to have some papers here in my desk." And with that, he got out all the adoption papers that his secretary had gave him, and they started filling in the papers. Little Bad Wolf had to print his name on the papers, and he was so excited because even though he was left-handed, he had a pretty good handwriting. When he printed, it was printed pretty good. He could read it. Oh, Mrs. Farmer Brown was just so proud of him. Well, Mr. Kilgore says, "Okay, you've answered all the questions on these papers to my satisfaction." He said, "I think we can proceed quite quickly." He said, "I will submit these papers to the judge." And he said, "I think," and he looks at his calendar, he said, "I think that Judge, let me see, which judge would be the best judge? I think that Mr. Crawford, the judge, Mr. Crawford, have you ever met him, Mr. Farmer Brown?" And Mr. Farmer Brown says, "I think he's one of the judges that I've never met." And so Mr. Kilgore says, "Well, he's a very nice judge." He said, "I've been in his court several times, and he takes all the cases to do with children. And there's not too many happy cases that this Mr. Crawford, handles. And I think this will be a happy case for him, and he'll be so happy that day." Now, this is his name, Mr. Holmes Crawford, judge of the second area, and this will be your judge. And he has an open court date on, let me see. This book is getting so filled up. He has an open court date on October the 15th. That's just right around the corner. Oh, now Little Bad Wolf was jumping up and down. because he knew the calendar and he knew it was coming up pretty soon, that September was almost over with. Another couple, 3 days, September will be all gone, and then it'll be 2 weeks, almost a little bit more, until October 15th. Oh my goodness gracious. And Mrs. Farmer Brown says, well, now, Mr. Kilgore, will you do me a favor, please? And Mr. Farmer Brown, or Mr. Kilgore says, yes, of course I'll do you a favor. What would you like? And she says, well, we promised a little bad wolf, but he could tell his friends and his teacher a week before the adoption came final. We said he could tell everybody. And you can see how he's squirming here. He's wanting to tell everybody right today. And Mr. Kilgore says, I will call you, Mrs. Farmer Brown. I will call you as soon as I know anything. Oh my goodness gracious. With that, little bad wolf was jumped up and down on the floor, just grinning from ear to ear, and his little tail was just bushing back and forth. Oh my goodness gracious, you couldn't keep that child still. And Mrs. Farmer Brown says, little bad wolf, come over here and sit on my lap. Oh, I get to sit on your lap, and you're going to be my mommy, and you're going to be my daddy. And Mr. Farmer Brown says, yes, we're going to be your mommy and your daddy. Oh, goodness gracious. So, they all shook hands with Mr. Kilgore, and they left the office. And the secretary, because she had pulled the paper, she knew what they were doing, and she was smiling from ear to ear. And they went out to lunch. And little bad wolf saw on the menu something that he had never seen before. He said, what's a grown-up grilled cheese? Because I love grilled cheese sandwiches. And Mrs. Farmer Brown says, well, a grown-up grilled cheese has lettuce and tomato, and sometimes bacon, and sometimes onions. Can I have that? Can I have that? Can I have that? Because it's a celebration. Please, 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 please. And she said, you don't have to say please, 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 because we're going to get you anything you want. And with that, they ate lunch, and the grown-up grilled cheese came with bacon and tomato and lettuce. And the waitress says, do you want onions on that? And little bad wolf says, oh, can I have onions too? I love onions. I love onions. I love onions. They had a wonderful lunch, and they went home, and Mrs. Farmer Brown says, little bad wolf, I think you're too excited to go back to school because I think you just wiggle, wiggle, wiggle on your desk all day. And all the boys and girls would think you had ants in your pants. So why don't you just stay here, and you can change clothes, and you can go out in the barn with Mr. Farmer Brown and do whatever he's going to do for the rest of the afternoon. Could I, Mr. Farmer Brown? Please, 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 please. And with that, they went out the door. And GrandMommy is going to go out the door and say goodbye. And I will see you Wednesday. Okay? Bye-bye. And don't forget, mommies and daddies and grandmommies and grandpoppies and boys and girls, if you're big enough, push your comment button and say something. Push your share button and push your like button. It's not hard. Just push, push, push. Okay? Bye-bye.